The first night. Robert was tired of dreaming. I always come out looking dumb, he said to himself. For example, he would dream of being swallowed by a big ugly fish, and even after it was over, he could smell the fish's awful stench. Or he'd be sliding down an endless slide, faster and faster, and no matter how many times he cried out, "Stop" or "Help," on he went until finally he woke up drenched in sweat. His dreams also played tricks on him whenever he wanted something really bad. Once he had his heart set on a racing bike with 28 gears, and he dreamed that the bike was waiting for him in the basement. It was an unbelievably detailed dream. The bike had a purple metallic finish, and it was parked next to the wine cabinet. He even knew the sequence of the combination lock. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He couldn't forget that now, could he? Well, in the middle of the night, still woozy with sleep, he staggered down to the basement in his pajamas. And what did he find next to the wine cabinet? A dead mouse. That was a low blow. Eventually, Robert came up with a way of dealing with the tricks his dreams played on him. The moment he started, he would think, without waking up, "It's just another one of those yucky fish. I know just what's going to happen. It's going to gobble me up, but I always know it's only a dream because only in dreams can a fish swallow a person." Or he'd think, "Here I go sliding again, but there's nothing I can do about it. I can't stop, and I'm not really sliding anyway." And when the fantastic racing bike came back to haunt him, or a computer game he couldn't live without, there it was, right next to the phone. He knew it was just a hoax. He didn't even look at the bike. He turned away. But no matter what he did, the dreams kept coming back, and that troubled him. And then suddenly one night, there was the double number. There was the number double. Robert was thrilled to be free of the hungry fish and the endless slide. This time he dreamed of a meadow. The funny thing was that the grass grew so tall that it seemed to reach the sky, or at least over his head. And what did he see but a gigantic beetle glaring at him, a caterpillar perched on a blade of grass, and an elderly man the size of a grasshopper bobbing up and down on a spinach leaf and staring at him with bright and shiny eyes. "Who are you?" Robert asked. The man responded in a surprisingly loud voice, "I'm the number devil." Robert was in no mood to put up with nonsense from a pipsqueak like that. "First of all, there's no such thing as a number devil." "Is that so? How can you be speaking to me if I don't exist? And besides, I hate everything that has to do with numbers." "And why is that, may I ask?" "You sound as though you never went to school, or maybe you're a teacher yourself. If 2 pretzel makers can make 444 pretzels in 6 hours, how long does it take 5 pretzel makers to make 88 pretzels?" "How dumb can you get?" said Robert. "A colossal waste of time, if you ask me. So get going, scram, shoo." But instead of doing as he had bidden, the number devil made an elegant leap and landed smack next to Robert, who was staging a sit-down strike in the tall grass. "Where does your pretzel tail come from?" "School, I bet." "Where else?" said Robert. "Mr. Bockle. He's our teacher, a new teacher. Well, he's always hungry, though he's got plenty of fat on him. Whenever he thinks you're not looking because we're so into the problems he gives us, he sneaks these pretzels out of his briefcase and wolfs them down." "I see," said the number devil with a weary smile. "I have nothing against Mr. Bockle, but that kind of problem has nothing whatever to do with what I'm interested in doing. What I'm interested in. Do you want to know something? Most genius mathematicians are bad at sums. Besides, they have no time to waste on them. That's what pocket calculators are for. I assume you have one." "Sure, but we're not allowed to use them in school." What did Robert see but an elf? Let's repeat. I see, said the number devil. That's all right. There's nothing wrong with a little addition and subtraction. You never know when your battery will die on you. But mathematics, my boy, that's something else again. You're just trying to win me over, said Robert. I don't trust you. If you give me homework in my dream, I'll scream bloody murder. That's child abuse. If I'd known you were going to be such a scaredy cat, I wouldn't have ended your dream. All I want to all I want is to perk you up a little. And since I'm off duty most nights, I thought I'd spare you those endless slides you've been going down. Gosh, thanks. I'm glad you understand. But I hope you understand that I won't let you take me for a ride. Suddenly the number devil leaped up out of the grass, a pipsqueak no more. That's no way to talk to a devil, he shouted, his eyes sparkling, and he trampled the grass until it was all flat. I'm sorry, Robert said meekly, though the whole thing was getting weirder and weirder. But if talking about numbers is as simple as talking about movies or bikes, why do we need why do they need their own devil? You hit the nail on the head, my boy, the devil replied. The thing that makes numbers so devilish is precisely that they are simple. And you don't need a calculator to prove it. You need one thing and one thing only. One. Which one? I'm speaking of the numeral. Of course, you can do almost anything. If you are afraid of large numbers, let's say 5,723,812, all you have to do is start with 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1, etc. And go on until you get to 5 million, etc. You can't tell me that's too complicated for you, can you? Any idiot can see that. Right, said Robert. And that's not all, the number devil added, picking up a walking stick with a silver knob and twirling it in front of Robert's nose. When you get to 5 million, etc., you can go on indefinitely. There's an indefinite number of numbers. Robert didn't quite know whether to believe him. How can you be sure? He asked. Have you tried? Can't say I have, the devil answered. It would take too long for one thing, and it makes no sense anyway. It would be a waste of time. Robert didn't see why. Either I can count to the end, in which case there is no such thing as infinity, or there is no end and I can't count to it. Wrong, the number devil shouted, his mustache quivering, his eyes bulging, and his face turning red with rage. What do you mean, wrong? Robert asked. You nincompoop, tell me, how many pieces of chewing gum do you think have been chewed this day? I have no idea. Guess. Billions, said Robert. If you take my friends Al and Betsy and Charlie and the rest of the kids in the class, and in the city, and in the country, and in the world, trillions. At least, said the number devil. Okay, now, let's pretend that everyone's gone on a chewing spree, and we're down to the last piece of chewing gum. I pull another one out of my pocket, the last one that I've saved for myself. And what have we got? All those trillions of chewed pieces of chewing gum plus one. Do you see what I mean? I don't really need to count them. All I need is a recipe to take care of anything that comes along, and that I have. After thinking over all that the number devil had said, Robert was forced to admit that he had a point. By the way, the reverse is true as well, the number devil added. The reverse? What do you mean? Simple, said the number devil with a grin. Just as there are infinitely large numbers, there are infinitely small numbers, and an infinite number of infinitely small numbers. So saying, he twirled his walking stick like a propeller in Robert's face. I'm starting to feel dizzy, thought Robert. It was the same feeling it had on the slide. Stop, he shouted. Why so jittery, Robert? Asked the number devil. It's perfectly harmless. Look, I just pull another piece of chewing gum out of my pocket. And he did. Only it was as long as a ruler, hard as a rock, in a strange shade of purple. You call that chewing gum? Robert asked. The chewing gum of your dreams, the number devil replied. And I'm going to share it with you. Watch carefully now. As long as it's whole, it's my chewing gum. One piece, one person. And sticking a piece of chalk, also a strange shade of purple, to the end of his walking stick, he said, here's how we write it, 1/1. He traced the two ones in the sky, the way airplanes skywrite advertisement. The purple numbers floated for a while against a blink white clouds, then melted away like a scoop of raspberry ice cream. Cool, Robert said. What I wouldn't give for a stick like that. Oh, it's nothing special, though it does write on anything, clouds, walls, screens, and I never need a notebook or a briefcase. But that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to our chewing gum. If I break it in two, I have one half, you have one half, and I have one half. One gum, two people. The gum goes on top, the people on the bottom. 1/1 plus 1. Now your friends want some too, of course. Al and Betsy, as you like. Let's say Al asks you for gum, and Betsy asks me for gum, and we share equally. That means we each get a quarter. 1/1 plus 1 plus 1 plus 1. But that's just the beginning. Everyone else will want a piece. The rest of the class, the rest of the city. So each of us four will have to break his fourth in half. And then that will have to be halved. And that halved, and that halved, and so on. Till the cows come home, said Robert, till the pieces are so tiny that you can't see them with the naked eye. Be that as it may, we go on halving until the 6 billion people on earth all have all had their share. But then comes the 6 billion mice, and they all want theirs. In other words, we'll never come to the end of it. Meanwhile, he had been writing an endless row of purple ones in the sky. You'll fill the whole world if you go on like this, Robert cried. Well, said the number devil, puffing himself up again, I'm only doing it for you. You're the one who's afraid of numbers. You're the one who wants everything simple so you won't get mixed up. But all those ones get so boring after a while. I don't think it's simple. It's just all those ones give me a headache. They actually make things more complicated than they are. Well, well, said the number devil, clearing the sky with a casual wave of the hand. So you agree we need something less clumsy than 1 plus 1 plus 1 numbers, for instance, which is why I invented them. You expect me to believe that you invented numbers? Me or a few others, it doesn't matter who exactly. Why are you so suspicious? What do you say I show you how to make all numbers out of ones? Okay, how? Simple. Start as follows. 1 times 1 equals 1. And go on to 11 times 11. I bet you need a calculator for that. Don't be silly, said Robert. 11 times 11 is 121. See, said the number devil, you've made 2 out of nothing but ones. Now try this. 111 times 111. That's too hard. I can't do it in my head. Then use your calculator. My calculator? You don't think I take it to bed with me, do you? Then use this one, he said, pressing one into Robert's hand. It had a funny feel to it, slimy, like dough, and it was a sickly shade of green. But it worked. Robert entered 111 times 111 and got 12,321. Cool, said Robert. Now we have 3. Right. Just keep going. So Robert entered the following: 1,111 times 1,111 equals 1,234,321. 11,111 times 11,111 equals 123,454,321. Very good, said the number devil, patting Robert on the shoulder. I'm sure you've noticed that not only did you get a new number each time, you got a number that reads the same forward and backwards, like Anna or Toot or Rotator. Robert thought that was a pretty cool trick, and so he tried 6 ones as well, and it worked. But when he got to 1,111,111 times 1,111,000 times 111, the calculator gave up the ghost. To Robert's surprise, it suddenly went psh and melted down into a sickly green goo. Yuck, said Robert, wiping the green mess from his fingers. All you need is a bigger calculator or a computer. A computer would spit out the answer in no time. Are you sure? Of course I'm sure. Robert thought that the number devil was a bit too confident. Maybe he was just bluffing. Robert decided to take a chance and said, You haven't tried it with hundreds. 11 trillion, 111 million, 111,111 times 11 trillion, 111 million, 111,111. Have you? No, I can't say I have. Well, I bet it doesn't work. The number devil started doing the problem in his head, but his face turned bright red again and swelled up like a balloon. It was because he was angry. Was it because he was angry, Robert wondered, or because the problem was hard? Wait a second, the number devil mumbled. I can't seem to come up with anything. You were right. It doesn't work. How did you know? I didn't. You don't think I'm crazy enough to try a problem like that, do you? I was just guessing. Guessing is not allowed in mathematics. Mathematics is an exact science. But when you said that numbers don't stop, that they go on till the cows come home, that was a guess, wasn't it? How dare you? What are you, anyway? A beginner? A ranked amateur? Do you want to teach me my trade? He grew bigger and fatter with every word. He started huffing and puffing. Robert was frightened. You pinhead, you pipsqueak, you stuck-up little number midget, he screamed, and no sooner had the number devil got the last word out that he burst with a great bang. Robert woke up. He had fallen out of bed and was a little dizzy, but he laughed to think he had outwitted the number devil. Is this clicking? The second night. Robert was sliding, the same old story. It had started the minute his head hit the pillow, and he couldn't stop. This time he was sliding along a tree. Don't look down, he thought, clinging to the tree for dear life and sliding on and on. Then, all at once, he landed with a plop on a soft bed of moss. He heard a giggle, and who did he see but the number devil perched on a velvety brown mushroom, smaller than Robert had remembered, and staring down at him with his shiny eyes. How did you get here? He asked Robert. Robert pointed at the tree trunk, which stretched as far as the eye could see. But it was not alone. There was a whole forest of them, and they weren't so much trees as ones. He had landed in a forest of ones. But that was not all. The air hummed with tiny fly-like numbers dancing in front of his nose. He tried shooing them away, but there were too many. Twos, threes, fours, fives, sixes, sevens, eights, and nines kept brushing against him. Robert had always hated moths and gnats and couldn't stand having these beasties around. Are they bothering you? Asked the number devil. He put his hand to his mouth and blew them away with a poof. Suddenly the air was clear of everything but the forest of ones reaching up to the sky. "Have a seat, Robert," said the number devil. Robert was surprised to find him so friendly. "Where? On a mushroom? Why not?" "But I'd feel silly. Where are we, anyway? In a picture book? Last time you sat on a spinach leaf, and now you're on a mushroom." "I seem to remember something like that in a book I once read. The mushroom in Alice in Wonderland, perhaps." "But what's the connection between a made-up story and mathematics?" "The kind of connection you make when you dream, my boy. You don't think I was behind all those flies, do you?" "No, I'm wide awake. You're the one in bed dreaming. Now, what do you say? Are you going to stand there forever?" Robert saw he had to do something, so he clambered onto the nearest mushroom. It was enormous and, except for a few bumps, as soft and cozy as an armchair. "How do you like it?" "It's fine," said Robert. "I just wonder who came up with the number flies in the forest of ones. I couldn't have. Not in my wildest dreams. It could only have been you." "And if it was," the number devil, preening himself on the mushroom, "though there's still something missing." "What?" "Nothing. I mean, zero." He was right. There hadn't been a single zero among all the flies. Why? Because zero was the last number to be discovered, which isn't surprising given that zero is the most sophisticated of the numbers. Here, look. When finding a space between two tree-high ones, he wrote some letters in the sky with his walking stick. MCM. "Tell me when you were born, Robert." "Me, 1986, said Robert a bit reluctantly. MCNLXXXVI, wrote the number devil. "I know what those are. Those are old numbers you sometimes find in the cemetery, and they come from the ancient Romans, who had a tough time of it, by the way, partly because their numbers were so hard to read, though this one is easy. I." "1," said Robert. "And this?" "X. X is 10, right, and this, my boy, is the year you were born." "The first M means 1,000, the C means 100, but because it comes after the second M, you must subtract it to get 900. L is 50 and X is 10, and you add them together, which gives you 80. V is 5, which you add to our friend 1 to get 6. So this is 1,000 plus 900 plus 80 plus 6. Gosh, that's awfully complicated. Right again. And you know why? Because the Romans had no zero. I don't see the connection. Besides, what's so great about zero? Zero means nothing, which is precisely what is so brilliant about it. But why even call it a number? Nothing doesn't count. Don't be so sure. Remember how we divided up the pieces of chewing gum among all those billions of people and hundreds of billions of mice? And how the portions got so small that in the end you couldn't see them, not even with a microscope? Well, we could have gone on forever without reaching zero. We'd have to come closer and closer, but we'd never have made it. So we've got to try something else. Minus, for instance. Yes, that should do the trick. He stretched out his walking stick and tapped the end of the ones. It shrank and shrank until it stood meek and manageable at Robert's feet. "Go at it," said the number devil. "What do you mean?" "Try the minus. 1 minus 1 is 0, Robert said. "Everyone knows that." "You see, I see how necessary 0 is. You can't do it without it. But why do we need to write it if nothing is left? Why not just leave a blank? Why invent a number for something that doesn't exist?" "Try this then. 1 minus 2 equals..." "That's easy. 1 minus 2 is minus 1. Right. But look what we get without 0. 4, 3, 2, 1, -1, 0, -2, -3, -4. The difference between 4 and 3 is 1. Between 3 and 2 is 1. Between 2 and 1 is 1. Between 1 and -1, 2. Which means there must be a number missing between 1 and -1. That tricky little 0. I told you we couldn't do without it. That brings us back to the Romans. They reckoned they could, and look what happened. Instead of 1986, they had to fiddle with all those M's and C's and L's and X's and V's. The Romans had to give each number a different letter, all because they didn't have a 0. But what's that got to do with our chewing gum and minuses? Forget the chewing gum, forget the minuses. The zero's real beauty lies elsewhere. But you'll need to use your head to appreciate it. Are you up for it, or are you too tired? No, not as long as I'm not sliding, I'm fine. In fact, I like it here on the mushroom. Good. Then let me give you a little problem to solve. Why is he suddenly being so nice to me? Robert wondered. I bet he's got something up his sleeve. But all he said was, fire away. And the number devil asked, 9 minus 1 equals, or 9 plus 1 equals 10, Robert answered like a shot. Is that all? How do you write it? I haven't got a pen. Then skywrite it. Here, take my walking stick. 9 plus 1 equals 10. Robert wrote in purple cloud. 1 and 0, the number devil said. 1 plus 0 doesn't equal 10. Oh, come off of it, Robert shouted. I didn't write 1 plus 0. I wrote 1 and 0, and that's 10. And why, may I ask, is that 10? Because that's the way you write it. And why do you write it that way? Why, Robert moaned. You're getting on my nerves. Want me to tell you? The number devil asked, leaning back leisurely on his mushroom. A long silence followed. Fine, go ahead. Robert blurted out when he couldn't bear it any longer. Simple. It comes from hopping. Hopping? Robert said scornfully. What's that supposed to mean? Numbers don't hop. Numbers hop if I tell them to hop, the number devil replied. Don't forget who you're dealing with. All right, Robert said. Just tell me what you mean by hopping. Gladly. Let's go back to square one, or rather, number 1. 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 equals 1. Tack on as many ones as you like, and you still get 1 for your answer. Sure, but what's your point? You'll see if you try the same thing with 2. Okay, said Robert. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. 2 times 2 times 2 times 4 is 16. 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 is 32. Wow, that goes fast. If I go much further, I'll need my calculator. It goes even faster if you're trying 5. Why don't you try 5? 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 5 times 5 is 125. 5 times 5 times 5 times 5 is 625. Whoa, Robert shouted. Why do numbers make you so jumpy? I can assure you that most large numbers are perfectly harmless. Says you, said Robert. Besides, I don't see the point of multiplying 5 by itself over and over and over. I'm coming to that. You know what the number devil does? Instead of writing all those boring 5s, he writes 5 to the first power equals 5. 5 squared equals 25. 5 cubed equals 125, and so on. 5 to the first, 5 to the second, 5 to the third. In other words, I make the numbers hop. Now do you see? Do the same with 10. It's easy as pie. You could throw your calculator away. Make the 10 do 1 hop. It remains exactly as is. 10 to the first power equals 10. Then make it hop twice, and you get 10 squared equals 100. Make it hop 3 times, and you get 10 to the third power equals 1,000. So, if I make it hop 5 times, Robert cried, I get 100,000. Once more, I get 1,000,000. And so on until the cows come home, said the number devil. Simple, eh? That's the beauty of zero. It lets you hold a space and move on. You could always tell a number's value by its position. The further to the left it is, the more it is worth. The further to the right, the less. When you write 555, you know that last five's worth is exactly 5 and no more. The next to the last 5 is worth 10 times more, that is 50. And the first 5 is worth 100 times more times the last one, that is 500. And why? Because it's been hopped up front. Now, the 5s of ancient Rome could never be anything but 5. Why? Because the Romans didn't know how to hop. And why didn't they know how to hop? Because they had no zero to keep its place, which meant they ended up with monstrosities like MCMLXXXV what? So rejoice, my boy, you're so much better off than the Romans. With the help of a friend zero and a bit of hopping, you can produce any number, big or small. Any number you please, 786 for instance. But I don't need 786. Really now, you're brighter than that. Try the year you were born, 1986. The number devil started growing again, and his mushroom followed suit. Well, what are you waiting for? He bellowed. Get a move on. There he goes again, thought Robert. Get him worked up about something? He's impossible, worse than Mr. Bockel. He carefully wrote, a large one in the sky. Wrong, the number devil screamed. Dead wrong. How did I wind up with a fool like you? I told you to produce the number, not scribble it down. Robert would have given anything to wake up. I'm not going to put up with this, he thought, watching the number devil's head swell up and turn redder and redder. The end, the number devil called down to him. Robert stared back, completely lost. Start at the end, not the beginning. If you say so, said Robert, who was in no mood to argue. He erased the 1 and wrote a 6 in its place. Finally caught on, have you? Well then, you may proceed. No problem, said Robert wearily, though I'd appreciate it if you didn't fly off the handle over every detail. Sorry, but what do you expect? I'm the number devil, not Santa Claus. How do you like my 6? The number devil shook his head and wrote, 6 times 1 equals 6. But that's the same, Robert protested. You'll see what I have in mind. Now comes the 8. Don't forget to hop. Suddenly, Robert did see what he had in mind. He wrote, 6 times 10, 8 times 10 equals 80. I get it, he shouted before the number devil could tell him what to do. With 9, I make 10 hop twice. And he wrote 9 times 100 equals 900. And 1 times 1,000 equals 1,000. That was a triple hop, he said. And now for the grand total. 6 plus 80 plus 900 plus 1,000 equals 1986. It's not bad after all. I don't even need the devil number. So you don't need the devil number? You're getting too big for your britches, boy. All you've had so far are the most ordinary numbers. Nothing to write home about. Wait till I start pulling numbers out of my hat. All kinds of numbers, unreal numbers, unreasonable numbers. You have no idea how many kinds of numbers there are. Numbers like that running around in circles. Numbers that play tricks with your brain. Numbers that go on forever. As he spoke, his grin got wider and wider. Robert could see all the teeth in his mouth. They, too, seemed to go on forever. And then he started twirling his walking stick in front of Robert's face again. Help! Screamed Robert and woke up. Still in a daze the next morning, Robert said to his mother, Do you know the year I was born? It was 6 times 1 and 8 times 10 and 9 times 100 and 1 times 1,000. I don't know what's gotten into the boy lately, said Robert's mother, shaking her head. Here, she added, handing him a cup of hot chocolate. Maybe this will help. You say the oddest things. Robert drank his hot chocolate in silence. There's some things you can't tell your mother, he thought. The third night. In time, Robert grew accustomed to dreaming of the number devil. He even came to look forward to it. True, he could have done without his know-it-all attitude, and his temper tantrums. You could never tell when he'd blow up and yell at you. But it was better, so much better, than being swallowed by a slimy fish or sliding down and down into a black hole. Besides, Robert had made up in his mind to show the number devil that he was no fool. You have to put people like him in their place, Robert thought, as he got ready for bed one night. The big ideals he has about himself, and all because of a zero. He wasn't much more than a zero when you got down to it. All you had to do was wake up and he was gone. But to put him in his place, Robert had to dream of him. And to dream of him, he had to fall asleep. And Robert suddenly noticed he was having trouble doing so. For the first time in his life, he lay awake in bed, tossing and turning. "What are you tossing and turning for?" All at once, Robert realized his bed was in a cave. There were weird paintings of animals on the stone walls. He had had no time to study them before because the number devil was standing over him, twirling his walking stick. "Rise and shine, Robert," he said. "Today's our division day." "Must I?" asked Robert. "You might have at least waited until I was asleep. Besides, I hate division." "Why?" "When you add or subtract or even multiply, things come out even. What bugs me about division is that you get this remainder. The question is when. When what? When do you get a remainder? And when don't you? And when you don't. That's what counts. You can tell just by looking at them that some numbers can be divided evenly. Right, like even numbers, which can all be divided by 2. No problem. I'm pretty good at threes as well. 9 divided by 3, 15 divided by 3, and so on. It's like multiplying in reverse. 3 times 5 is 15 because 15 divided by 3 is 5. I don't need a number devil for that. I can do that. I can do it on my own. Robert shouldn't have said that. The number devil, his mustache quivering, his nose reddening, his head growing bigger and bigger, jerked Robert out of bed. "What do you know?" the number devil shouted. "Just because you learned the multiplication tables, you think you know all there is to know? Well, you don't. Well, you know nothing. Nothing whatsoever." "There he goes again," thought Robert. "First, he drags me out of bed, then he hits the ceiling when I tell him I can do division. Here I come to a rank beginner out of the goodness of my heart, and no sooner do I open my mouth than he starts making wisecracks." "The goodness of your heart," Robert cried. All things being equal, he would have upped and left. But how do you up and leave a dream? He looked all over the cave and could find no way to leave. "What are you looking for?" "A way out. If you go now, you'll never see me again. I'll leave you to choke on Mr. Bloxell's pretzel problems, or die of boredom in his class." Robert knew when he was licked. "I apologize," he said. "I didn't mean to offend you." "Good," said Rob. "Good," said the number devil. His anger subsided quickly as it had come. "Now, 19. Try 19. See if you can divide it without a remainder." Robert thought and thought. "The only way I can come up with," he said at last, "is to divide it by 19, or into 19 equal parts." "Doesn't count," the number devil replied. "It's too easy." "Divided by 0? Out of the question." "Out of the question? Why?" "Because it's forbidden. Dividing by 0 is strictly forbidden." "What if I did it anyway?" "Then all mathematics would come apart at the seams." He was about to lose his temper again, but he managed to pull himself together. "Tell me," said the number devil, "what would you get if you divided 19 by 0? "I don't know. 100 maybe, or 0, or anything in between." "But didn't you say, when you were talking about the threes, that division was like multiplying in reverse? If that's the case, then..." 3 times 5 equals 15 means that 15 divided by 3 is 5. Well, now try that with 19 and 0. 19 divided by 0 is, say, 19. In reverse, 19 times 0 is 0. You see? And no matter what number you take, you always get 0, which means you must never divide a number by 0. Okay, said Robert, I give up. But what do we do with 19? No matter what number I divide it by, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 9, I'm stuck with a remainder. Come a little closer, said the number devil to Robert, and I'll tell you a secret. Robert leaned so close to the number devil that his mustache tickled his ear. There are 2 types of numbers, he whispered. The garden variety, which can be divided evenly, and the rest, which cannot. I much prefer the latter. You know why? Because they're such prima donnas. From the very first, they've caused mathematicians no end of trouble. Wonderful numbers, though. Even 11, 13, or 17. Like 11, 13, or 17. Robert couldn't get over how blissful the number devil looked. He might have had a piece of chocolate melting in his mouth. Now tell me, dear boy, what is the first prima donna numbers are? 0, said Robert, to get his standard up. 0 is forbidden, the number devil shouted, brandishing his walking stick. All right, then, 1. 1 doesn't count. How many times do I have to tell you? Okay, said Robert, calm down. 2, to begin with, because, like all prima donnas, it could only be divided by 1 in itself. And 3, or at least I think so. Not 4. We've been through that. 5, for sure. 5 isn't divisible by anything. And so on. Ha! What's that supposed to mean? He said, rubbing his hands together, a sure sign he had something up his sleeve. The wonderful thing about prima donnas is that no one knows there and so on. No one but me, of course. And I won't tell. Not even your friends? Nobody, never. The thing is, you can't know whether a number is a prima donna or not merely by looking at it. No ordinary mortal can know without testing it. How do you test it? You'll see, he said. He started scribbling all over the wall of the cave with his walking stick. This is what it looks like when he was through. Now, take my walking stick, young man, and tap every number that isn't a prima donna. That will make it disappear. But there's no 0, Robert complained. No 1. How many times must I tell you? 0 and 1 are unlike all the other numbers. They are neither prima donnas nor the ordinary kind. Don't you remember what you dreamed back at the very beginning? That all numbers come from 1. And then later we saw the need for 0. Whatever you say, said Robert. Anyway, first I'll tap the even numbers because they're all divisible by 2. That's easy. All the even numbers but 2, the number devil warned. Don't forget, 2 is a prima donna number. Robert picked up the stick, and in no time flat, the wall looked like this. Now do 3. 3 is a prima donna number, but the rest of the numbers in the threes column of multiplication table, 6, 9, 12, etc., are not, because they can be divided by 3. When Robert had taken care of 3, the following numbers were left. Now 4, said Robert. No, we don't need to bother about numbers divisible by 4. They're all gone, because 4 isn't a prima donna. 4 is 2 times 2. But 5 is a prima donna. Not 10, though, which is gone because 2 times 5. You can tap all the ones that end in 5. Right. Robert was hitting his stride. We can forget about 6. 6 is 2 times 3. But 7 is a prima donna number. Good for you, cried the number devil. 11 too. And what others? That, my dear readers, is a question for you yourselves to find the answer to. Copy the chart and go on tapping until only prima donna numbers are left. Well done, Robert, said the number double, lighting his pipe and chuckling to himself. What's so funny, said Robert. It's not so hard if you stop at 50, he answered with a wicked grin, and settling into a comfortable cross-legged position. But if you have a number like 10,019 or 141,421,356,237,307, is it a prima donna or isn't it? If you knew how many mathematicians have racked their brains over the issue. Why, even the greatest number devils have come to grieve over it. But I thought you said you knew the and so on of the prima donna numbers. You just didn't want to tell me to let me in. Well, maybe I overstated my case a little. I'm glad you can admit you're not perfect, said Robert. Sometimes you sound like a number devil, less like a number devil than a number dictator. The more simple-minded number devils use great computers. They keep them running for months at a stretch. The trick I taught you, taking care of the 2s and 3s and 5s first, is old hat. Not that it doesn't work, but when the numbers start getting really big, you know that there's no end to them. You can make them grow bigger than the universe just by adding or multiplying or hopping. Now, there are all kinds of more sophisticated ways of doing things, but clever as they are, they don't seem to get us very far. That's what makes them so devilishly interesting. And what is devilish fun, don't you think? And so saying, he twirled his stick with a great relish. Yes, but what's the point of all this? Robert asked. You do ask stupid questions. The world of numbers is never so musty as your Mr. Bloxel, Mr. Pretzel, makes it out to be. Luckily, you've got me to initiate you into some of the secrets. Like this, for instance. Take any number larger than 1 and multiply it by 2. 222, said Robert, times 2 is 444. Between the first and the second number, there is always, and when I say always, I mean always, at least one prima donna. Are you sure? 307, said the number devil, but it works with gigantic numbers too. Where did you learn these things? You haven't seen anything yet, he said, savoring Robert's curiosity. Nothing could stop him now. Take an even number, any one at all, so long as it's larger than 2, and I can find 2 prima donnas that add up to it. 48, Robert said. 31 plus 17, said the number devil without blinking an eye. 34, said Robert. 29 plus 5, said the number devil without even taking the pipe out of his mouth. And it works all the time, Robert asked, amazed. Why? How come? To tell you the truth, the number devil said, his forehead wrinkling and his eyes looking upward at the smoke rings he was blowing, I wish I knew. Nearly every number devil of my acquaintance has tried to come up with an explanation. It always works, but no one knows why. Pretty nifty, thought Robert. He laughed and said, well, I think it's great. But what he really thought was great was that the number devil had told him the inside story. For a while the number devil had a rather crotchety expression on his face, as he always had when he didn't quite know what to do. But when he heard Robert laugh, he laughed too, and started puffing on his pipe again. You're not so stupid as you look, my boy. I'm sorry I have to leave you, but I've got a few more mathematicians to visit tonight. I get a kick out of torturing them a tad. With that, the number devil began to grow thin. No, not so much thin as transparent. Then suddenly, all that was left to him was a cloud of smoke, and the scribbling on the wall. Then the wall started swimming before Robert's eyes, and the cave felt soft and warm as a blanket. Robert tried hard to remember what was so wonderful about prima donna numbers. but his thoughts were all white and cloudy like a cotton mountain. He had rarely slept so well.